adapting really nicely to the changes. They're using our new roost that we put up, which, by the way, in that video I misproperly called this lumber 1x2. It's actually 2x3. So if you're gonna build this roost, my apologies. I'm gonna somehow put a note in that video so people notice that. These 5-gallon bucket nest boxes are working great, and they're so cheap. I don't think I'll ever do one of these again. It's gonna be 5 gallons all the way. If you want to see how to build this, you can check out those videos. Some weeks on the homestead are just a little bit more difficult than others. Two power outages in 1 week. That makes things a little bit more difficult here. Now obviously, sometimes external sources make your life harder on the homestead. So like this, right? The snow. This isn't our fault, other than maybe choosing to live in New England. And it makes life on the homestead a lot more difficult than an average day. But a lot of times, when you look in the mirror, that person right there, you are the reason why you're having a difficult time homesteading. And in today's video, we want to talk about 5 big mistakes that we made homesteading over these last 6 years, so that you can avoid making these mistakes on your journey and hopefully have an easier time homesteading.
I gotta go let Ladybug out, and I gotta fix some fencing. There you go.
I was like...
Right now I'm out in our apple orchard, our perennial orchard, our food forest. This used to be a garden. The first mistake we made in this homestead was jumping in too big when we got started. We talked about that in that recent video. But essentially what we did here in this garden, our very first year of gardening ever, we made an enormous, like 1/8 of an acre garden. It was way too big. We had never really gardened before. My wife had a little bit, but I had never done it. And it was just too much to take care of. We spent a lot of time preparing it. We screened topsoil. It was a ton of work. And we wound up getting like no veggies because it got weeded up quickly. We couldn't care for it all, and we got frustrated. The following year, I built a few raised beds, and we got more produce out of a couple raised beds than we ever did out of this enormous garden.
This is why a cow is better for us this year than goats. Look at that fencing.
Oh man, look at that fencing. Fixing the garden, bud.
Yeah.
We've had a wonderful time owning a dairy cow so far. Got a different brush. But that hasn't been the case with all of our animals. You want that one. Gentle. As you know from our videos about goats, we've had some really terrible experiences with the goats we've bought. Mostly because they've been impulse buys. Impulse buys are fun the day of, and that's the last time they're fun. The first goat we bought, I decided that week I wanted a goat. I looked on Craigslist, I saw a La Mancha goat for sale. I decided we wanted her. So we went that day and bought her. And we regretted that decision after that because we hadn't done enough research. We hadn't asked any questions about the particular goat. We just picked her up, threw her in the minivan, and brought her home. And then after that, she was a pain in the butt, that goat. She could escape out of everything. We weren't set up for her. We ended up impulse buying probably 10 more goats. Out of those 10 or so goats, one of them was a gem. She still wasn't the right fit for us though, and we ended up selling her later. Now I think we finally learned our lesson. We did a lot of research before we brought home a cow. We found Ladybug. We asked a lot of questions about her, and she's been the best animal purchase on our farm to date. Another thing we did the first few years we were homesteading was we really bought into the natural myth. The natural myth is that if you raise your animals naturally that they'll never have any problems, but that's not true. We had goats get worms even though they were free ranged. We had pigs get pneumonia even though we put them on pasture. So we learned that just because you're doing things naturally doesn't mean you won't have any problems.
Keep pushing.
No.
Got nailed. Up here near the house, you can see another one of our mistakes that we made homesteading. I want to show you something here. The generator's pretty loud over here. I'm just going to show you the plant. That right there is what's left of what was a giant rhododendron plant. Like that one leg? That rhododendron plant was giant. There was another one right over here. Rhododendrons, azaleas, mountain laurel, they are poisonous to animals. And we knew that they were here on the property, but we had read on some very popular homesteading blogs that if goats have enough access to the food, the browse that they like, they won't eat poisonous plants. Well, it turns out that's just not true. These mountain laurel behind me, and right there where that giant rhododendron was, our goats, when we let them out to free range, they could have eaten anything, grass, weeds, browse, leaves. They dashed to these rhododendron plants, and we wound up losing 2 goats to rhododendron and mountain laurel poisoning. The mistake there was believing misinformation. And this is really easy to do on the internet. All it takes for a blog or a YouTube video to be the #1 ranking answer on Google is for it to be popular. So if you have a really awesome Pinterest picture, something that gets shared like crazy, your post can wind up at the very top as the answer in Google. And that post can be totally wrong. So don't trust just any information that you find on a blog or a vlog. It's not to say that there's not good information out there, just make sure that you check that information. I personally, first and foremost, like to take the advice of local mentors. If I can find someone locally who's doing this, who can give me really good advice, I trust them first. Second, I look to books and printed materials, maybe magazines. And then third, I'll look at blogs and vlogs, but I will make sure that the advice they're giving is backed up by years of successful experience. You can watch that video there where sadly we lost a goat to a poisoning that didn't have to happen, but did because we made the mistake of trusting bad information. I find like if I run, it looks more natural. Because I like being natural. How do you walk on camera and not look like you're walking on camera? The biggest mistake we made is one that is very easy to avoid, but I think a lot of homesteaders do this. We've covered 4 out of the 5 big mistakes that we've made homesteading. We talked about not starting off too big.
Not impulse buying. Don't believe in the natural myth.
We talked about not relying on bad information. Probably the biggest mistake we made homesteading, that's the one you all watched us do like 2 years ago. We just went too big. We got too many different kinds of animals.
I was pregnant, so a lot of the stuff I do on the farm, such as health, checking the health of the animals, things like that, I couldn't do. Austin was in charge of, but between moving the fencing around for the chickens, for the goats, for the sheep, for the pigs,
it got out of hand, and at the time I still had clients I had to take care of and a ton of other work, and it just became so much not fun and just a big frustration.
We burned out big time.
And to the point where we went and made that video and that podcast, which you can still watch. We left up to show you that sometimes you'll wind up there. We made that episode of the show announcing to you that we were selling the farm and we were done homesteading and we needed a break.
We never actually took that break. We didn't sell this house. And the next spring we were back farming again.
Yeah, we never stopped. We love homesteading and it's part of who we are.
But we did too much.
You know what they say about too much of a good thing?
It's a good thing?
No.
What do they say?
Too much of a good thing.
That's just the saying.
That's a
saying. You know what they say.
You know what
do they say?
I don't know. Too much of a good thing.
It's kind of awesome. It would have been easy for us to avoid some of these mistakes.
All you have to do is make sure you research first from reputable sources.
And plan ahead. Don't make impulse decisions like we did.
We made a lot of impulse.
So many times.
Impulse goats. And finally, make sure that your infrastructure is in place and ready before any, animals show up. Again, kind of like the impulse buy. If you apply those rules, you'll avoid all those big mistakes that we made.
Go make your own.
Yeah. And that's okay. It's part of the learning process, and that's how you get to be better at things. But don't make the mistakes we made. We made those for you. Speaking of big mistakes, it would be a really big mistake not to sign up to our email list, because tomorrow we're releasing a video with the biggest news we've ever announced on this channel. Bigger than we're done homesteading. So sign up to that email list, and tomorrow, as soon as that video is released, we'll send you an email saying, hey, check it out and hear the news.